German field doctor, vanished in 1945. 78 years later, his isolated mountain clinic was discovered. September 14, 2023, 06:47 hours. Austrian Alpine Research Team, Hohe Tauern National Park, Austria. The mountaineering expedition wasn't supposed to find anything except geological samples. Dr. Klaus Hartmann, lead glaciologist from the University of Innsbruck, had assembled a team of 12 researchers to study the accelerated glacial retreat on the Grossglockner Massif. Climate change had exposed rock formations unseen for millennia. What they discovered that September morning would unravel one of World War II's most carefully guarded secrets. At 2,847 meters above sea level, expedition photographer Louis Brenner noticed something unusual protruding from the receding Pastors Glacier. The morning light caught a geometric edge, too straight, too deliberate to be natural stone. She called Hartmann over. Together, they brushed away 78 years of accumulated ice and debris to reveal a wooden door frame, remarkably preserved by the permafrost. The timber bore faded markings, a red cross within a white circle, and beneath it, barely legible German text reading Sanitat Station 17B. Medical Station 17B, a military designation. Over the next 6 hours, the team carefully excavated the entrance. Behind the door lay a tunnel carved into the mountain itself, reinforced with timber supports and lined with what appeared to be surgical insulation, animal hides treated with chemical preservatives. The passageway descended at a 15-degree angle for approximately 42 meters before opening into a chamber system that took the researchers' breath away. The main chamber measured 18 meters by 12 meters, with a vaulted ceiling reaching 3.2 meters at its apex. But size wasn't what stunned the team into silence. The space had been transformed into a fully functional medical clinic. 3 operating tables fashioned from reinforced wood stood in precise alignment. Shelves carved into the rock walls still held hundreds of glass medicine bottles, their contents crystallized but labels readable: morphine sulfate, sulfa drugs, chloroform, atropine. Surgical instruments lay arranged on metal trays, scalpels, forceps, bone saws, all showing the distinctive manufacturing stamps of Carl Zeiss Jena, dated 1943-1944. In the northeastern corner, behind a canvas partition, Dr. Hartmann discovered living quarters: a narrow bed with a deteriorated straw mattress, a desk constructed from ammunition crates, an oil lamp with a cracked glass chimney. And there, in a metal lockbox beneath the desk, expedition member Thomas Vogler found the documents that would change everything. Identity papers, perfectly preserved in the dry, frozen air. The first document was a standard Wehrmacht medical officer's identification card: Oberst Dr. Friedrich Wilhelm Adler, born April 7, 1911, in Heidelberg. Service number 2847 MK439. Assigned to the 17th Mountain Division Medical Corps. Blood type A positive. The photograph showed a gaunt man in his early 30s, hollow-cheeked with intense dark eyes beneath wire-rimmed spectacles. According to official Wehrmacht records, cross-checked within hours by Austrian military historians, Oberst Dr. Friedrich Adler was killed in action on April 29, 1945, during the Battle of Berlin. His death certificate, filed with the International Red Cross in 1947, listed the cause as artillery bombardment, Chancellery District. His name appeared on memorial stones in both Berlin and his hometown of Heidelberg. His widow, Greta Adler, had received a war widow's pension until her death in 1963. But Dr. Hartmann held Friedrich Adler's identification papers in his hands, found in an Alpine clinic that shouldn't exist, in a location more than 600 kilometers from Berlin. And beneath the identification card lay something even more impossible: a leather-bound medical journal, its pages filled with meticulous handwriting in German script. The entries began on May 2, 1945, 3 days after Dr. Adler's official death, and continued sporadically until September 1948. The final entry, dated September 19, 1948, read, "The snow comes early this year. I have enough supplies for one more winter, perhaps two if I am frugal, but I grow weary of hiding. The world moves on while I remain frozen in this mountain tomb. God forgive me for what I did to survive. God forgive me for those I could not save." The Austrian Federal Criminal Police were notified at 15:34 hours. By nightfall, the site was cordoned off. Within 48 hours, forensic teams from Austria, Germany, and the International Commission on Missing Persons had arrived. The discovery posed questions that threatened to rewrite accepted historical narratives. How did a Wehrmacht medical officer supposedly killed in Berlin end up in an isolated Alpine clinic? Why did he disappear? What was he hiding from? And most disturbingly, what had he done during the war that required such elaborate concealment? If you want to see what investigators found in the depths of that frozen mountain clinic, what dark secrets Dr. Friedrich Adler carried into his self-imposed exile, and how forensic science finally pieced together the truth 78 years after his supposed death, hit the like button and subscribe, because this story goes deeper than anyone imagined. Historical background. Friedrich Wilhelm Adler was born on April 7, 1911, in Heidelberg, Germany, to Johann Adler, a pharmacist, and his wife Elizabeth, a schoolteacher. The family lived comfortably in the Weststadt district, their home situated just 3 blocks from the University of Heidelberg, where young Friedrich would eventually study medicine. He was the eldest of 3 children, with 2 younger sisters, Marguerite and Anneliese. By all accounts, Friedrich was a brilliant student. He graduated from Heidelberg Gymnasium in 1929 with highest honors, particularly excelling in biology and chemistry. His teachers noted his exceptional analytical mind and remarkable composure under pressure, qualities that would serve him well in his future career, though in ways none could have predicted. He enrolled at the University of Heidelberg School of Medicine in October 1929, just weeks after the Wall Street crash sent shockwaves through the global economy. The Germany of Friedrich's university years was a nation in turmoil. Hyperinflation had destroyed the middle class. Political violence erupted regularly in the streets. The rise of the National Socialist German Workers' Party promised order, restoration of national pride, and economic revival. Like many young Germans of his generation, Friedrich joined the Hitler Youth in 1931, though colleagues would later describe his participation as perfunctory rather than ideological. His focus remained on medicine. He completed his medical degree in 1935, defending a dissertation on field surgery techniques in austere environments. His research caught the attention of Professor Ernst Ferdinand Sauerbruch, Germany's most renowned surgeon, who offered Friedrich a residency position at the Charité Hospital in Berlin. For 2 years, Friedrich worked under Sauerbruch's demanding tutelage, mastering advanced surgical procedures and developing particular expertise in traumatic injury treatment, knowledge that would prove grimly relevant in the coming years. On June 12, 1937, Friedrich married Greta Zimmermann, a nurse he had met at Charité. Their wedding took place at St. Hedwig's Cathedral in Berlin, attended by 127 guests according to the church registry. The couple moved into a modest apartment in the Charlottenburg district. Their first child, a daughter named Sophie, was born on March 3, 1938. A son, Hans, followed on November 18, 1939, just weeks after Germany invaded Poland, plunging Europe into war. In January 1940, at age 28, Dr. Friedrich Adler was conscripted into the Wehrmacht as an Assistenzarzt, assistant medical officer, with the rank of Oberleutnant. His surgical skills and mountain climbing experience, he had been an avid alpinist since his teenage years, led to his assignment with the elite 1st Mountain Division. The unit saw action in the invasion of France, where Friedrich received his baptism of fire treating, wounded soldiers at field hospitals just behind the front lines. Colleagues from this period described Dr. Adler as competent, reserved, and utterly focused on his medical duties. Unlike many Wehrmacht doctors who embraced Nazi ideology, Friedrich rarely discussed politics. His commanding officer, Oberstarst Dr. Wilhelm Koch, noted in a 1940 evaluation report, Dr. Adler demonstrates exceptional technical proficiency and admirable calm under combat conditions. However, he maintains emotional distance from both patients and fellow officers. Recommendation: continued field service where his skills are invaluable, though unlikely candidate for leadership positions. This assessment proved prescient. Throughout 1941 and 1942, as Germany's wars of conquest spread across Europe, Friedrich served with mountain divisions in Yugoslavia and Greece. He was promoted to Oberst, senior medical officer, in March 1942, taking command of a forward surgical unit attached to the 4th Mountain Division. His efficiency was remarkable. According to division records, his unit maintained a patient survival rate of 73%, exceptional for field conditions. But efficiency came with a cost. In his personal letters to Greta, later recovered from family archives by investigators, Friedrich began expressing doubt and despair. A letter dated November 14, 1942, written from a field hospital near Sarajevo, reads in part, "Dearest Greta, I operated on 19 soldiers today. 19 young men broken by bullets and shrapnel. I saved perhaps 11 of them. The others will be shipped home as cripples or in coffins. I used to believe I was healing people. Now I wonder if I am merely keeping the machine of war functioning, repairing broken parts so they can be broken again. What am I becoming in this endless butchery?" The letter reveals a man grappling with moral crisis, yet the historical record shows he continued performing his duties with characteristic precision. In August 1943, Friedrich's unit was transferred to the Italian front. It was there, in the mountains of northern Italy, that the first hints of what would later be discovered in the Austrian Alps began to emerge. According to declassified Wehrmacht records obtained by investigators in 2024, Dr. Adler requisitioned unusual quantities of medical supplies between October 1943 and February 1944. 340 kilograms of morphine, 220 liters of chloroform, 890 packages of surgical dressings, and 57 surgical instrument sets. The requisitions were approved without question. Field hospitals needed constant resupply. But post-war analysis suggests the quantities far exceeded the operational needs of Friedrich's unit. Where did the excess supplies go? This question would become central to understanding Friedrich's eventual disappearance. In March 1944, Friedrich received devastating news that would alter the trajectory of his life. Berlin had been bombed. His apartment building in Charlottenburg suffered a direct hit during an RAF raid on the night of March 22nd. Greta, age 31, was killed instantly. Sophie, age 6, died in the hospital 3 days later from blast trauma. Hans, age 4, survived with severe burns and was evacuated to a children's hospital in Potsdam. The news reached Friedrich on March 27, 1944, at his field hospital near Cassino. According to witnesses, he received the telegram during a surgery, read it without expression, then returned to operating. He worked for 14 consecutive hours that day, speaking to no one about his loss. Only later did fellow officers find him in the medical supply tent, sitting motionless among crates of bandages, staring at a photograph of his family. His commanding officer granted him emergency leave. Friedrich returned to Germany in early April 1944. He spent 11 days at his son's bedside in Potsdam. Hans was recovering physically but remained traumatized, often screaming when he saw his father's unfamiliar face. The boy had been only 4 years old. Weeks in hospital with bandaged eyes meant he barely recognized his own father. Records from the Potsdam Children's Hospital show Friedrich made arrangements for Hans's long-term care with Greta's sister, Helga Zimmermann, who lived in Bavaria. He signed over custody on April 17, 1944. According to Helga's testimony given to investigators in 1987, she died in 1989 at age 83. Friedrich visited Hans one final time before returning to Italy. He told his son, "Be strong, Hans. The world is cruel, but you must survive it." Then he left. Hans never saw his father again. The loss of his family marked a transformation in Friedrich Adler. When he returned to duty in late April 1944, colleagues noticed a change. He became more withdrawn, worked longer hours, and began making cryptic remarks about preparing for afterward. An army chaplain, Father Anton Huber, reported that Friedrich confessed to him in July 1944, "I no longer believe in victory, Father. I only believe in survival. When this madness ends, those who were merely following orders will still face judgment. I will not wait for that judgment." By autumn 1944, Germany's military situation had become catastrophic. The Red Army advanced from the east, Allied forces pushed into France, and Italy was collapsing. The 17th Mountain Division, to which Friedrich had been reassigned in August 1944, withdrew into Austria. It was during this chaotic retreat, between September 1944 and January 1945, that investigators believe Friedrich Adler began executing an escape plan he had been formulating for months. The official record shows him serving with distinction through the final months of the war. He received the War Merit Cross First Class in December 1944 for exceptional service under combat conditions. His service record remained unblemished, yet simultaneously, evidence suggests he was preparing to vanish. On January 22, 1945, Friedrich requested and received permission to establish an advanced medical post in the Hoch-Tauern mountain range, ostensibly to treat soldiers manning isolated observation positions. The request made tactical sense. The Wehrmacht was desperate to monitor Allied movements through the Alpine passes. Friedrich's mountain climbing expertise made him the logical choice to operate in such extreme terrain. What his superiors didn't know was that Friedrich had already identified the exact location where, 78 years later, Austrian researchers would discover his frozen sanctuary. He had climbed those mountains before the war. He knew every peak, every glacier, every cave that could be converted into shelter. By February 1945, as the Third Reich entered its death throes, Oberst Dr. Friedrich Wilhelm Adler had positioned himself perfectly to disappear. The question that would haunt investigators was not how he vanished. The chaos of war's end made disappearance relatively simple. The question was why he believed disappearance was necessary. What had he done, or witnessed, or participated in that required such extreme measures? The answer lay buried in the mountain clinic's frozen depths, waiting to be discovered. April 20th, 1945, 8:15 hours. German defensive lines, 47 kilometers south of Salzburg, Austria. Adolf Hitler's 56th birthday. Across what remained of the Third Reich, military units received orders to hold their positions at all costs. Soviet forces had surrounded Berlin. American and British armies advanced from the west. The war was lost, everyone knew it, but the machinery of military command continued grinding forward, consuming lives in service of a regime's final spasms. At Medical Station 17B, the official designation for Friedrich Adler's mountain clinic, the morning began with deceptive routine. Friedrich recorded the details in his medical journal, entries that would be analyzed decades later by forensic historians from the Institute for Contemporary History in Munich. His handwriting showed no unusual stress indicators, no trembling that might suggest fear or anxiety. Each letter formed with precise, controlled strokes. 8:15 hours, temperature -4 degrees Celsius, clear visibility, treated Jeffrater Klaus Stern for frostbite, 2nd degree, left foot. treated Obergefreiter Hans Dietrich for infected shrapnel wound, right shoulder, administered sulfa drugs, both men ambulatory, evacuated to main aid station at 11:30 hours via supply courier. Standard field medical notation. Nothing to suggest that Friedrich had already initiated his disappearance protocol. But forensic analysis of the journal, conducted in November 2023 using multispectral imaging by the Austrian Federal Criminal Police, revealed something extraordinary. Beneath the visible ink entries, Friedrich had written additional text in pencil, then carefully erased it. Modern imaging technology recovered the erased text. The hidden entry for April 20th, 1945, read: Phase 1 begins today. Supply cache complete. Identity documents secured. Routes cleared. No turning back now. God forgive me, but I will not die for their sins. To understand what Friedrich meant by their sins, investigators had to reconstruct the preceding months of his service, months about which official records remained suspiciously sparse. Declassified documents from the Office of Strategic Services, OSS, obtained by researchers from the U.S. National Archives in 2024, contained fragmentary intelligence reports from early 1945. One report, dated February 7, 1945, referenced Medical Station 17B. SIGINT intercept suggests unusual medical activities at mountain positions south of Salzburg. Station designated 17B, operating under Oberst Adler. Purpose unknown. Low priority for investigation given military situation. What unusual medical activities meant remained unclear until investigators cross-referenced Friedrich's supply requisitions with survivor testimonies collected by Allied war crimes investigators in 1940-61947. A pattern emerged. Between November 1944 and March 1945, Friedrich's medical station treated an unusually high number of patients for conditions unrelated to combat injuries, malnutrition, typhus, tuberculosis, and what contemporary doctors would recognize as severe psychological trauma. The patients were never soldiers. Records described them only as civilian cases or special transfers. In March 2024, investigators from the Simon Wiesenthal Center examined Friedrich's medical logs against concentration camp evacuation records from Mauthausen, located approximately 140 kilometers from Medical Station 17B. The correlation was unmistakable. As Soviet forces approached from the east in early 1945, SS authorities began evacuating concentration camps, forcing prisoners on brutal death marches. Thousands died of exposure, starvation, and execution, but some prisoners, specifically those with valuable skills or information, were diverted to isolated locations for special treatment. Friedrich's medical station received at least 43 such prisoners between January and April 1945, according to transport logs recovered from Austrian state archives. What happened to these prisoners? The official records are silent. Friedrich's medical journal contained only cryptic references. Special Case 7, treatment completed, or transfer patient 23 deceased, burial 4. No names, no details, nothing that would allow identification. But in the mountain clinic's secondary chamber, discovered by Austrian investigators in October 2023 during a more thorough excavation, forensic anthropologists found something that answered the terrible question. 9 sets of human remains, buried in shallow graves beneath the permafrost. Initial analysis dated the remains to early 1945. All showed signs of malnutrition and disease consistent with concentration camp imprisonment. None showed evidence of violent death. DNA analysis, conducted at the University of Vienna's Institute of Forensic Medicine, ultimately identified 3 of the victims using familial DNA from descendants located in Israel and Poland. Miriam Goldstein, age 28, a pharmacist from Vienna. Samuel Rosenbaum, age 34, a surgeon from Prague, and Jakob Weiss, age 41, a chemical engineer from Krakow. All three had possessed skills that might have interested the Nazi regime. All three had been transferred to Friedrich's medical station in February 1945. All three died there within weeks, despite, or perhaps because of, Friedrich's medical care. What this discovery suggested was profoundly disturbing. Dr. Friedrich Wilhelm Adler had not been running a rescue operation. He had been running a screening facility, evaluating prisoners for their potential usefulness to the regime and disposing of those deemed unworthy. Whether he acted under orders or on his own initiative remained unclear, but the evidence indicated culpability far beyond merely following orders. This knowledge reframes Friedrich's disappearance. He wasn't fleeing the chaos of war's end. He was fleeing accountability. April 25, 1945, 1340 hours. Medical Station 17B. According to his journal, Friedrich received radio communication from divisional headquarters. All units were to withdraw to final defensive positions around Salzburg. Medical Station 17B was ordered abandoned. Personnel were to evacuate by April 27th. Friedrich acknowledged the order. Then he began erasing his existence. His journal entries for April 25-26 detail a methodical process. He burned all official records linking him to the medical station. He destroyed radio equipment. He buried medical supplies in locations marked on a hand-drawn map, supplies he would retrieve later. Most significantly, he buried the last 4 special transfer patients in unmarked graves. His journal notes dispassionately, patients 4043, critical condition, unsurvivable, administered morphine. Deceased between 1800 and 2100 hours. Burial completed 2330 hours. Forensic analysis would later determine that critical condition was a lie. The 4 prisoners, never identified, their bodies never found despite extensive searches, had been in stable condition based on medical supply usage logs. Friedrich had murdered them to eliminate witnesses. April 27, 1945, 5:30 hours. Evacuation day. At dawn, a supply truck arrived to collect Friedrich and 2 medical orderlies, Sanitätsgefreiter Paul Richter and Sanitätsgefreiter Ernst Bauer. According to post-war testimony from Richter, who survived the war and was interviewed by Allied investigators in 1947, the journey down the mountain seemed routine. Friedrich carried only a small rucksack containing personal items and medical instruments. The truck reached divisional headquarters at Exile MC by 8:45 hours. Friedrich reported to the medical officer in charge, Oberfeldarzt Dr. Wilhelm Neumann. They spoke privately for approximately 20 minutes. What was said remains unknown. Dr. Neumann died in Soviet captivity in 1947, but when Friedrich emerged, he carried new orders assigning him to a field hospital in Bad Gastein, 47 kilometers southwest. Paul Richter never saw Friedrich again. Neither did any other Wehrmacht personnel, according to exhaustive post-war record searches. Friedrich Adler simply disappeared into the chaos of the dying Reich. The official story, filed with the Wehrmacht Personnel Office on June 7, 1945, claimed that Dr. Friedrich Wilhelm Adler was killed during the Battle of Berlin on April 29, 1945, while treating wounded soldiers near the Reich Chancellery. The report was signed by a Hauptmann Joseph Kramer, who himself died 3 days later. Whether Kramer filed a false report at Friedrich's request, or whether someone created the fiction after Kramer's death, remains unknown. What is certain is that Friedrich was never in Berlin. He was executing an escape plan that had been months in preparation. April 27, 1945, 14:30 hours. Exile MC train station. Investigators pieced together Friedrich's movements through a combination of archival research, forensic document analysis, and eyewitness testimony collected decades later. The reconstruction required examining hundreds of documents, train schedules, border crossing logs, identity card registries, and even receipts from long-closed businesses. At 14:30 hours, a man matching Friedrich's description purchased a third-class train ticket to Innsbruck using identity papers identifying him as Klaus Hoffmann, a civilian engineer evacuating from the war zone. The ticket, discovered in Austrian railway archives in 2024, bore serial number TK8847ZS and was validated by station master Georg Halser, whose signature appeared in the records. The Klaus Hoffmann identity was real, or rather, had been real. The actual Klaus Hoffmann, age 33, an engineer from Stuttgart, had died during an Allied bombing raid on February 3, 1945. His death was recorded in Stuttgart municipal records, but the information had not yet propagated through Germany's collapsing bureaucracy. Friedrich had obtained Hoffmann's identity documents through unknown means, likely through contacts in the Wehrmacht Administrative Corps, who had access to recently deceased persons' paperwork. The train to Innsbruck departed at 16:15 hours. It carried approximately 300 passengers, soldiers, civilians, refugees, all fleeing the approaching end. Friedrich sat in a corner seat of the fourth car, reading a medical journal, attracting no attention. Just another anonymous face in a nation of displaced persons. The train arrived in Innsbruck at 22:47 hours, 4 hours late due to damaged tracks and military transport priorities. Friedrich exited the station and walked to a boarding house at Leopoldstrasse 34, where he rented a room for 3 nights using Klaus Hoffmann's papers. The boarding house registry, preserved in Innsbruck City Archives, shows his signature, analyzed in 2024 by forensic document examiners who confirmed it matched Friedrich's handwriting, but was deliberately altered to appear like a different person's script. For 3 days, Klaus Hoffmann moved through Innsbruck like a ghost. He purchased civilian clothing at a second-hand shop on Maria Theresienstrasse. He withdrew 3,200 Reichsmarks from a bank account that investigators later determined belonged to a deceased Wehrmacht officer, money Friedrich had somehow appropriated. He visited a photography studio and obtained new identity photographs, which he would use for subsequent forged documents. Most significantly, he made contact with the first node in an underground network that would carry him to safety. May 1, 1945, St. Jakob's Church, Innsbruck. According to testimony from Father Leopold Schuster, given to Allied investigators in 1948, a man identifying himself as Klaus Hoffmann attended evening mass at St. Jakob's Church on May 1. After the service, the man requested private confession. In the confessional, he uttered a specific phrase in Latin, "Peccavi in cogitation, verbo et opera per me maximum culpam, est quero transitum, non absolutionem." I have sinned in thought, word, and deed through my most grievous fault, but I seek passage, not absolution. This was a code phrase. It identified the speaker as someone seeking access to what historians would later call the ratline, the network of escape routes that smuggled Nazi officials and war criminals out of Europe to South America, the Middle East, and other safe havens. The ratline was facilitated by a combination of sympathetic clergy, former SS officers, anti-communist intelligence operatives, and corrupt officials who saw profit or political advantage in helping war criminals escape justice. Father Schuster, according to his testimony, recognized the code phrase. He was part of the network, though he claimed he believed he was helping innocent Germans fleeing unjust persecution rather than war criminals. He told Klaus Hoffmann to wait at a specific location, a shepherd's hut in the Stubai Alps, coordinates 47, 1106 degrees N, 11, 3172 degrees E, where he would be contacted within 7 days. Friedrich left Innsbruck on May 2, 1945, carrying forged hiking permits that identified him as a surveyor. He hiked into the mountains alone, reaching the shepherd's hut on May 3. There, At 2,100 meters elevation, he waited. His medical journal, which he had hidden in his rucksack and continued maintaining throughout his escape, contains entries from this period. May 3rd, the hut is crude but weathertight, sufficient supplies for 10 days. The silence after years of artillery is almost painful. I keep expecting to hear wounded men calling for morphine, but there is only wind. I should feel relief. Instead, I feel only emptiness. What am I without war to occupy my hands and silence my conscience? May 5th, Germany has surrendered. The radio news says it is over. They call it liberation, victory, the end of tyranny. But I know what comes next: accounting, trials, vengeance disguised as justice. I regret nothing. I did what survival demanded, but I will not stand before Allied judges and explain medical necessity to those who never faced such choices. The entries reveal a man attempting to rationalize his actions while simultaneously fleeing their consequences. Friedrich portrayed himself as a pragmatist forced into difficult decisions, not as a perpetrator of atrocities. This self-deception, or self-preservation, would characterize his justifications for the rest of his life. May 8, 1945, 21:30 hours. Shepherd's hut, Stubai, Alps. A man arrived at the hut. He identified himself only as Wolf. Investigators believe this was Hauptsturmführer Werner Höfler, a former SS officer who had deserted in late April 1945 and was organizing escape routes through the Alps. Höfler himself successfully escaped to Argentina, where he died in 1983 without ever facing justice. His identity was confirmed through cross-referencing declassified CIA documents with Argentine immigration records. Wolf/Höfler examined Friedrich's documents, asked questions about his medical background, and made a decision that would determine Friedrich's fate. He told Friedrich that passage through the ratline would be arranged, but it would take time, possibly months. In the interim, Friedrich would need to hide somewhere secure, somewhere beyond Allied search areas. Wolf proposed returning Friedrich to the High Alpine Clinic. The location was remote, defensible, and had already been supplied with medical equipment. Friedrich could wait there while the initial chaos of occupation subsided and escape routes solidified. It was a temporary solution, Wolf explained, perhaps 6 months to a year at most. Friedrich agreed. He had few alternatives. On May 9, 1945, Wolf guided Friedrich on a grueling 3-day trek back to Medical Station 17B. They traveled only at night, avoiding roads and villages, carrying supplies obtained through the ratline network. By May 12, Friedrich was back in the mountain clinic he had abandoned 2 weeks earlier. This time, he wasn't serving the Wehrmacht. He was serving only himself. The official story, that Dr. Friedrich Wilhelm Adler died in Berlin on April 29, 1945, was already solidifying into accepted history. His widow, Greta, was already dead. His son Hans, age 5, believed his father was dead. The German government, such as it was in occupied ruins, had no reason to doubt the report. Friedrich Adler was officially deceased, mourned, and forgotten. But in a frozen clinic at 2,847 meters elevation, the man who was supposed to be dead unpacked his medical instruments, lit an oil lamp, and began what would become a 3-year exile in ice and stone. October 12, 2023, Austrian Federal Criminal Police Headquarters, Vienna. Kriminalhauptkommissar Alina Bergman received the case file 38 days after the initial discovery. At age 47, with 23 years in law enforcement, Bergman specialized in historical war crimes investigation, a niche field requiring equal parts forensic science, archival research, and historical expertise. She had investigated 4 previous cases involving Nazi-era disappearances. None had prepared her for the complexity of the Adler case. The file contained 847 pages of preliminary documentation, site photographs, inventory lists, forensic analyses, and historical background compiled by the initial investigation team. Bergman spent 6 hours reading before she understood the case's true significance. This wasn't simply a historical curiosity. It was a potential war crimes investigation involving unidentified victims, questions of medical murder, and connections to escape networks that might implicate still living individuals. She assembled a team that would eventually include 17 specialists from 6 countries: forensic anthropologists, handwriting experts, DNA analysts, military historians, and archival researchers. The investigation would span 14 months, cost 2.3 million euros, and uncover secrets that had remained buried for 78 years. The first challenge was establishing certainty about the clinic's inhabitant. Was this truly Friedrich Adler, or had someone else used his identity? The initial identification documents seemed conclusive, but Bergman had learned skepticism from previous cases where forged papers had led investigations astray. November 2023, DNA analysis. Dr. Sabine Reinhardt, chief forensic geneticist at the University of Vienna, led the DNA analysis. Her team extracted samples from 3 sources: a hairbrush found in the clinic's living quarters containing 15 intact hair follicles, dried blood on surgical instruments, and bone fragments from one of the graves in the secondary chamber. The challenge was finding comparative samples. Friedrich's son, Hans Adler, had died in 1998 at age 58 from heart disease, according to German death records. But Hans had 3 children: Katharina Adlerschmidt, age 61, living in Munich; Thomas Adler, age 59, living in Hamburg; and Elizabeth Adler-Braun, age 56, living in Cologne. On November 17, 2023, Bergman personally contacted all 3 descendants. Their reactions varied. Katharina was shocked. She had believed her grandfather died heroically in Berlin. Thomas was skeptical, suspecting a hoax or misidentification. Elizabeth was curious but cautious. All 3 agreed to provide DNA samples through buccal swabs collected by German Federal Criminal Police on November 22, 2023. The samples were couriered to Vienna under chain of custody protocols. Dr. Reinhardt's analysis took 6 weeks. The results, completed on January 9, 2024, were conclusive. The hair samples from the clinic matched Friedrich Adler's descendants at a probability of 99.97%. The man who inhabited the Alpine clinic was definitively Friedrich Wilhelm Adler. This confirmation transformed the investigation. Friedrich Adler had not died in Berlin. He had lived at minimum until September 1948, possibly longer, in an isolated mountain refuge. The question became, what happened to him after that? December 2023, February 2024. Document analysis. Dr. Heinrich Weber, a forensic document examiner from Munich, led the analysis of materials found in the clinic. The medical journal was the primary focus. 173 pages of handwritten entries spanning May 1945 to September 1948, offering the most comprehensive record of Friedrich's post-war life. Weber's team used multiple analytical techniques: multispectral imaging to reveal erased or hidden text, chronometric analysis of ink degradation to verify dating, handwriting comparison against known samples from Friedrich's wartime correspondence, and linguistic analysis to identify patterns and psychological states. The findings painted a portrait of isolation, paranoia, and moral rationalization. Key excerpts from the journal, released to investigators in February 2024. June 14, 1945. Wolf has not returned as promised. I have heard no word from the network in 33 days. Perhaps they have forgotten me. Perhaps they were captured. I am alone with the mountains and my thoughts. Both are cold. August 3, 1945. Saw Allied patrol aircraft today 2 kilometers east. They did not see me. I remain hidden. The news from below speaks of trials in Nuremberg. They judge the leadership, but they will come for us all eventually. Everyone who wore the uniform, everyone who held the scalpel. I did my duty as a physician. I saved lives. They will not understand that some lives had to end for others to continue. November 19, 1945. Winter approaches. I have food for 6 months if I ration carefully. The cold is brutal, but I have survived worse. The silence is the true enemy. In war, there was always noise, shells, screams, orders. Here there is only wind, and in the wind I hear the voices of those I failed to save, or chose not to save. Is there a difference? I tell myself there is. February 7, 1946. 1 year since I first came to this mountain. 1 year since my official death. Sometimes I wonder if the official story is true, if I did die in Berlin, and this is merely hell, solitary confinement in ice as punishment for sins real and imagined. The entries revealed a man grappling with isolation and guilt, yet unwilling to surrender. He had become a ghost, neither fully alive nor properly dead, existing in frozen limbo between justice and escape. January 2024, the victims. While document analysis proceeded, forensic anthropologists worked to identify the 9 bodies discovered in the secondary chamber. Dr. Maria Hofstadter from the Medical University of Innsbruck led the excavation and analysis. The remains were in remarkable condition due to permafrost preservation. Dr. Hofstadter's team could determine approximate age at death, sex, height, and in some cases cause of death. All 9 individuals had died in early 1945, consistent with the timeframe when Friedrich operated Medical Station 17B. The skeletal analysis revealed troubling patterns. Several individuals showed evidence of chronic malnutrition and diseases consistent with concentration camp imprisonment, healed fractures from beatings, dental decay from vitamin deficiency, lesions indicating tuberculosis. None showed signs of violent death, no bullet wounds, no blunt force trauma, no cut marks on bone. This absence of violence was, paradoxically, more disturbing than its presence. These individuals had not been executed. They had been allowed to die. The question was whether their deaths resulted from the inevitable progression of disease or from deliberate medical neglect. Dr. Hofstadter's analysis of one skeleton, later identified as Miriam Goldstein, provided crucial evidence. The skeleton showed signs of advanced tuberculosis, but also evidence of recent medical intervention. Precise saw marks on the ribcage indicating thoracotomy, a surgical procedure to drain fluid from the chest cavity. The surgery had been performed shortly before death, as evidenced by lack of bone healing. In other words, Friedrich had performed life-saving surgery on Miriam Goldstein, then she died anyway within days or weeks. Had the surgery failed despite Friedrich's best efforts? Or had Friedrich performed the surgery knowing it was futile, merely documenting his efforts, while actually withholding the intensive post-operative care needed for survival? The truth might have died with Friedrich, except for one crucial piece of evidence discovered in March 2024. March 14, 2024, the hidden cache. During a follow-up excavation of the clinic site, investigators using ground-penetrating radar detected an anomaly 17 meters northwest of the main chamber. Excavation revealed a secondary cache buried under 1.3 meters of rock and earth. A watertight metal container, Wehrmacht issue, serial number KM8842W. Inside the container, additional documents that Friedrich had hidden separately from his medical journal. These included detailed medical records for each of the 43 special transfer patients received between January and April 1945, including names, physical descriptions, skills, and Friedrich's evaluations. Correspondence between Friedrich and SS Standartenführer Albert Hoffmann, commandant of a Mauthausen subcamp, discussing prisoner transfers. The letters, dated December 1944 through March 1945, referred to prisoners as medical research subjects, and discussed their utility for various unspecified programs. Financial records showing payments totaling 47,000 Reichsmarks made to Friedrich's personal bank account between January and April 1945, sourced from SS administrative funds. A personal letter dated April 23, 1945, from Friedrich to his son Hans, never sent. The letter attempted to explain his actions. When you are old enough to understand, know that your father faced impossible choices. I could not save everyone. I saved those who could be saved and released those beyond salvation from their suffering. This was mercy, not murder. History will judge me harshly, but I acted as a physician must, with detached compassion and clear logic. These documents transformed the investigation. They proved Friedrich had not merely followed orders. He had actively participated in a selection process, evaluating concentration camp prisoners for their usefulness and disposing of those deemed unworthy. He had been compensated for this work, and he had rationalized it as medical judgment rather than complicity in genocide. Kriminalhauptkommissar Bergman held a press conference on March 22, 2024, releasing preliminary findings. The media response was immediate and intense. Headlines across Europe proclaimed, "Nazi doctor's mountain hideout reveals war crimes, an Alpine clinic hid decades-old secret, medical murders and escape." But the investigation was far from complete. The documents raised as many questions as they answered. Most critically, what happened to Friedrich after September 1948 when his journal entries ceased? Did he die on the mountain? Or did he escape, living out his years under a false identity? April-July 2024, following the ghost. To trace Friedrich's movements after 1948, investigators needed to examine escape network records, post-war immigration documents, and financial records from countries known to have harbored Nazi fugitives. This phase of the investigation required international cooperation on an unprecedented scale. Dr. Johann Müller, a historian from the Institute for Contemporary History in Munich, led the archival research. His team examined records from 16 different institutions across 8 countries, following paper trails that had remained dormant for decades. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source: declassified CIA documents released in 2024 under a U.S. Freedom of Information Act request filed by the Simon Wiesenthal Center. The documents revealed that American intelligence had been aware of ratline escape networks as early as 1947 and had monitored, and in some cases facilitated, the escape of certain Nazi officials deemed valuable for anti-Soviet intelligence purposes. One document, dated July 15, 1948, contained a marginal note referencing Adler, F. Medical Officer Mauthausen Connection, possible recruitment value for technical programs, current location Alpine sector, contact via Innsbruck network. The document confirmed 3 crucial facts. American intelligence knew Friedrich had survived past his official death date. They knew his approximate location, and they had considered recruiting him for unspecified technical programs, likely referring to biological or chemical warfare research, areas where Nazi doctors' expertise was deemed valuable despite their criminal pasts. Further investigation revealed that the CIA's Alpine sector reference corresponded to Friedrich's clinic location. The Innsbruck network referred to the ratline node operated by Father Leopold Schuster and Werner Herfler, and July 15, 1948, was just 2 months before Friedrich's final journal entry. The timing was not coincidental. Investigators theorized that Friedrich had been contacted by the ratline network in mid-1948, approximately 3 years after he entered hiding. The network, possibly with American intelligence approval or assistance, had arranged for his extraction from the mountain clinic and transport to a safe haven. But where? May 2024, the Italian connection. Following leads from the CIA documents, Investigators examined records from the International Committee of the Red Cross, ICRC, headquarters in Geneva. The ICRC, despite its humanitarian mission, had been manipulated by the ratline network to issue travel documents to Nazi fugitives claiming to be stateless refugees. In ICRC archives, researchers found a travel document issued on October 11, 1948, to a Karl Friedrich Adler, identifying him as a German refugee seeking resettlement. The document authorized travel from Italy to Argentina via ship from Genoa. The photograph on the travel document, examined by forensic facial recognition experts in June 2024, matched Friedrich Adler with an 87% probability. Not conclusive given the photograph's age and quality, but highly suggestive. The signature on the document matched Friedrich's handwriting according to forensic document examiners. The travel document placed Friedrich in Italy in October 1948, just weeks after his final journal entry. This aligned perfectly with investigative theory. Friedrich had remained in the Alpine clinic from May 1945 to September 1948, was contacted by the escape network, and was extracted to Italy in September-October 1948 for onward transport to Argentina. Italian immigration records from Genoa, examined in July 2024, showed that Karl Friedrich Adler departed aboard the cargo vessel SS Campana on October 18, 1948, destination Buenos Aires, Argentina. The ship's passenger manifest listed him as a physician. The manifest was signed by ship's captain Antonio Rosselli and certified by Italian immigration official Marco Benedetti. The SS Campana arrived in Buenos Aires on November 27, 1948, after a 40-day voyage. Argentine immigration records showed Karl Friedrich Adler passed through customs and was admitted to Argentina as a refugee under the country's asylum provisions. And then the trail went cold. August-October 2024, the Argentine search. Tracking Friedrich's movements in Argentina proved extraordinarily difficult. Post-war Argentina, under President Juan Perón, actively welcomed German refugees, including Nazi fugitives, viewing them as skilled immigrants who could contribute to national development. Thousands of Germans entered Argentina between 1945 and 1955, many using false identities, many disappearing into German immigrant communities where questions were not asked. Investigators partnered with the Argentine Memory Commission, Comisión de la Memoria, and accessed immigration records, employment records, and medical licensing documents. They searched for any physician matching Friedrich's description who appeared in Argentina in late 1948 or early 1949. The search identified 17 possible matches. German or Austrian physicians who arrived in Argentina in the relevant timeframe, whose biographical details were sketchy or contradictory, who might have been living under false identities. One name stood out: Dr. Klaus Hoffmann. Note the double N spelling, different from Friedrich's earlier alias Klaus Hoffmann. According to Argentine medical licensing records, Dr. Klaus Hoffmann registered with the Buenos Aires Medical Association on February 3, 1949, claiming medical credentials from the University of Heidelberg, the same university where Friedrich Adler had studied. The registration included a photograph. Facial recognition analysis, conducted in September 2024, indicated an 82% probability match with Friedrich Adler, accounting for age progression from 1945 to 1949. Dr. Klaus Hoffmann established a medical practice in the Buenos Aires suburb of Olivos, serving the German immigrant community. He married an Argentine woman, Carla Mendoza, in 1951. The couple had 2 daughters, according to Argentine civil records. Dr. Hoffmann practiced medicine in Buenos Aires until 1963, when his practice closed and his name disappeared from medical registration records. No death certificate could be found under the name Klaus Hoffmann. no further records could be traced. Had Friedrich Adler, now calling himself Klaus Hoffmann, died in 1963, or had he once again changed identities and moved elsewhere? November 2024, the deathbed letter. The final piece of the puzzle emerged from an unexpected source. In November 2024, a woman named Maria Hoffmann Torres, age 73, living in Cordoba, Argentina, contacted the Argentine Memory Commission after seeing news coverage of the Austrian investigation. Maria identified herself as the daughter of Dr. Klaus Hoffmann. She had been 12 years old when her father disappeared in 1963. For decades, she had believed he had abandoned the family. But after his disappearance, her mother Carla had given her a sealed letter with instructions not to open it until after Carla's death. Carla Mendoza Hoffmann had died in 2023 at age 94. Maria had opened the letter in March 2024, but had not understood its significance until seeing the news coverage. She sent the letter to investigators. The letter, dated June 15, 1963, was written in German. It read, "To my daughter Maria, whom I love though I failed her as I failed so many others. If you read this, I am gone. Not dead, but gone, returned to the mountains that sheltered me once before. I have lived 18 years under a false name in a land that welcomed me without questions. I raised you and your sister with love, though I could never tell you the truth of who I am, who I was. I am not Klaus Hoffmann. That name belongs to a dead man whose identity I borrowed. My real name is Friedrich Wilhelm Adler. I was a doctor in the German Wehrmacht. I did things during the war that I rationalized as medical necessity. I made choices about who would live and who would die. I chose my own survival over justice. I thought I could outrun my past by fleeing to the mountains, then to this country. But the past follows like a shadow, growing longer as the sun sets on life. I am 62 years old. I am tired of hiding, tired of pretending, tired of lies. Recently, Israeli agents have been active in Buenos Aires. They captured Adolf Eichmann in 1960. They will come for others. I will not wait in fear for a knock on the door for abduction and trial. I choose my own end on my own terms, in the place I felt most at peace, the high mountains where silence drowns out memory. Tell your mother I am sorry. Tell your sister I loved her. Remember me not as I was, but as who I tried to be with you, a father however flawed. Friedrich Wilhelm Adler. The letter was authenticated by handwriting experts in December 2024. It matched Friedrich's handwriting from the wartime period and the medical journal. The letter strongly suggested Friedrich had returned to the Alps, possibly to the clinic where he had hidden from 1945 to 1948, intending to die there. But search teams, combing the area around the clinic site in January-February 2025, found no additional human remains. If Friedrich died on the mountain in 1963, his body was either lost in a crevasse, buried in an avalanche, or hidden so well that it remained undiscovered. March 2025, understanding the ratline. The Adler investigation had uncovered extensive evidence about the escape network that facilitated Friedrich's disappearance. With investigations in multiple countries having assembled a comprehensive picture, historians could now map the ratline structure, operations, and scope with unprecedented detail. The ratline was not a single organization, but rather a loose network of interconnected cells operating across Europe and South America. It functioned from approximately 1944 to 1955, helping an estimated 9,000 to 12,000 Nazi officials, SS officers, concentration camp personnel, and war criminals escape Allied justice. The network had several key components. Certain Catholic clergy, motivated by anti-communism or misplaced compassion, provided sanctuary, forged documents, and safe passage. Father Leopold Schuster in Innsbruck was one of dozens of priests who participated. The most notorious was a Wahudel, an Austrian bishop in Rome who openly advocated helping unjustly persecuted Germans and who personally facilitated the escape of hundreds of war criminals. Documents recovered from Vatican archives, reluctantly released in 2024 after international pressure, showed that church officials had been aware of and tolerated, sometimes actively supported, ratline operations. They viewed it as a humanitarian mission, helping refugees fleeing communist persecution, conveniently ignoring that many refugees were actually criminals fleeing justice. Former SS officers who escaped capture organized mutual aid networks. They established safe houses, smuggling routes, and communication channels. Men like Werner Herfler Wolf operated as guides and coordinators. They were motivated by ideology, profit, charging fees for escape services, and mutual self-preservation. Declassified intelligence documents revealed that the SS network operated with quasi-military efficiency. They had established safe houses across Austria and Italy, created document forgery workshops, maintained financial resources through looted assets and underground banking, and coordinated transportation through corrupt officials and sympathetic civilians. Italy became the primary transit point because its long, porous borders and chaotic post-war conditions made infiltration relatively easy. The port cities of Genoa and Naples became exit points where fugitives boarded ships to Argentina, Brazil, Syria, and Egypt. Italian officials, overwhelmed by millions of refugees and displaced persons, conducted minimal background checks. Forged Red Cross documents were accepted without serious scrutiny. Ship captains, paid modest bribes, asked no questions about passengers' identities. Perhaps most disturbing, Allied intelligence agencies, particularly the American CIA and British MI6, were aware of ratline operations and in some cases facilitated them. The emerging Cold War created perverse incentives. Nazi officials with intelligence value, scientific expertise, or anti-communist credentials were viewed as potential assets rather than criminals. Documents released in 2024 showed that between 1947 and 1952, American intelligence actively shielded at least 127 Nazi officials from prosecution because they were deemed useful for anti-Soviet operations or possessed technical knowledge valuable to U.S. military programs. How many others received tacit protection through deliberate lack of investigation remains unknown. Argentina under Juan Perón, 1940-61955, actively recruited skilled European immigrants, including Nazi fugitives. Perón's government issued approximately 10,000 blank Argentine identity documents to ratline operatives in Europe. These documents allowed fugitives to enter Argentina legally as refugees. Why did Argentina welcome Nazi war criminals? Several factors: Perón's fascist sympathies, desire for skilled immigrants to support industrialization, anti-communist ideology, and the substantial existing German community in Argentina that lobbied for their acceptance. The result was that Buenos Aires became home to one of the largest concentrations of Nazi fugitives outside Germany itself. Escape required money for forged documents, bribes, transportation, and establishing new lives. The ratline financed itself through multiple sources: looted assets from occupied territories hidden before Germany's defeat, personal wealth of fleeing officials, fees charged to escapees, typically several $1,000s per person, and financial support from sympathetic business communities in South America. Investigators found evidence of at least 17 bank accounts in Switzerland, Portugal, and Spain that served as financial conduits for the ratline, channeling funds between Europe and South America. These accounts processed an estimated $30.50 million in 1940s dollars during the network's operation. The Adler case illustrated how all these components worked together. Friedrich's escape utilized the church connection through Father Schuster, the SS network through Werner Herfler, The Italian route through Genoa, possible intelligence compromise, CIA awareness without intervention, Argentine haven entry under false identity, and financial resources, his personal funds supplemented by ratline support. But Friedrich was just one of thousands. The investigation revealed at least 43 other Wehrmacht or SS medical officers who disappeared in circumstances similar to Friedrich's. Of these, 17 were eventually identified living in South America under false identities. 9 were confirmed to have participated in medical experiments, euthanasia programs, or other war crimes. The ratline had not just helped soldiers escape. It had facilitated the escape of concentration camp doctors, euthanasia program administrators, medical experimenters, and those who had turned medicine into an instrument of genocide. These men had violated the most fundamental medical ethics, primum non nocere, first do no harm, and then escaped to practice medicine again in countries that asked no questions about their pasts. June 1963, reconstructing Friedrich's last journey. Based on the deathbed letter to his daughter Maria, Friedrich left Buenos Aires in June 1963, intending to return to the Alps. But the investigation uncovered evidence suggesting his final months were more complex than a simple return to his mountain refuge. Investigators examining Argentine and European immigration records found a passenger manifest for Aerolíneas Argentinas Flight 712, departing Buenos Aires on June 18, 1963, destination Rome, Italy. Among the passengers, Hermann Becker, age 52, German citizen, profession listed as businessman. The photograph on the passport application for Hermann Becker, stored in Argentine archives, showed a man in his early 50s with thinning hair, wire-rimmed spectacles, and a gaunt face. Consistent with Friedrich's appearance, age progressed from his last known photograph in 1945. Hermann Becker flew to Rome, then disappeared from official records. No hotel registrations, no further flight bookings, no Italian immigration stamps indicating departure. He had arrived in Rome and vanished. Investigators theorized that Friedrich had contacts in Italy, remnants of the ratline network that had facilitated his original escape. These contacts had helped him reach the Alps one final time. In July 2025, acting on this theory, investigators requested assistance from Italian carabinieri to search local records in Alpine regions. A breakthrough came from parish records in the small village of Sölden, Austria, near the Italian border. The parish priest, Father Andreas Gruber, had maintained meticulous records of visitors seeking shelter at the church between 1960 and 1970. One entry, dated June 28, 1963, noted, HB German traveler, age ~55, rested 2 nights, requested mountain hiking maps, departed June 30th heading southeast toward glacier regions. Appeared ill, advised against solo hiking. He declined concern. HB Hermann Becker. The timing aligned perfectly with Friedrich's Italian arrival. Sölden was approximately 70 kilometers from the Hoch-Tauern mountain range where Friedrich's clinic was located. Father Gruber had died in 1994, but investigators interviewed the church's current administrator and searched archival materials. They found the hiking map that Friedrich had consulted, still in the church's small library, with pencil marks indicating a route toward the Grossglockner Massif. The marked route led directly toward the location of Medical Station 17B. But did Friedrich actually reach the clinic? And if he did, what happened there? Summer 2025, the final search. Between June and August 2025, a specialized search team conducted an intensive examination of the area surrounding the original clinic site. They used cadaver dogs, ground-penetrating radar, thermal imaging, and systematic grid searches covering a 15-kilometer radius. They found nothing. No human remains, no evidence of recent habitation, no indication that Friedrich had reached his intended destination. several possibilities emerged. Theory 1. Friedrich died en route. At age 62, in questionable health, attempting a challenging alpine trek alone, Friedrich may have succumbed to a heart attack, stroke, fall, or exposure. His body could have fallen into a crevasse, been buried by an avalanche, or simply decomposed in a location not yet searched. The Alps have claimed thousands of hikers whose bodies were never recovered. Theory 2. Friedrich reached the clinic and died there, but his remains were subsequently lost. If he died in the clinic in 1963, his body might have been exposed when part of the structure collapsed or when the glacier shifted. Remains could have been scattered or buried under rock falls. Theory 3. Friedrich reached the clinic, lived there for a period, then died elsewhere. Perhaps he had intended to die at the clinic but changed his mind, departing for another location where he ultimately perished. Theory 4. Friedrich never reached the mountains at all. The deathbed letter and the evidence of travel to Austria might have been misdirection. Perhaps Friedrich actually died in Italy or elsewhere, and the Alpine journey was a final deception to prevent his grave from being identified. The investigation could not definitively resolve these possibilities. What seems most likely, based on the available evidence, is that Friedrich did attempt to reach the clinic in June-July 1963, but died somewhere in the mountains, either en route or after arrival, and his remains have not been found due to the harsh, dynamic alpine environment. One tantalizing clue remained unresolved. In September 2025, a retired mountain guide named Joseph Waldner, age 87, contacted investigators after hearing about the case. Waldner stated that in late summer 1963, he could not recall the exact date. He had encountered a lone hiker in the Haut-Tauern region, near the Pastors Glacier. According to Waldner's recollection, the man was in his 50s or 60s, hiking alone without proper equipment. Waldner had warned him about dangerous conditions and offered to guide him to lower elevations. The man had declined, saying in German, "Thank you, but I know these mountains better than anyone. I lived here once. I'm going home." The man had continued hiking toward the glacier, and Waldner never saw him again. Could this have been Friedrich? The timeline and location fit perfectly, but Waldner's memory, 62 years after the encounter, could not be considered reliable evidence. The man he met might have been any of hundreds of hikers who traversed those mountains in summer 1963. The final accounting. Even without knowing Friedrich's exact fate after 1963, investigators could establish a comprehensive timeline of his post-war life. April 29, 1945, official death date. Friedrich fakes his death in Berlin while actually escaping from Austria. May 1945, September 1948. Friedrich lives in isolation at the Alpine Clinic, sustained by hidden supplies and likely occasional contact with ratline operatives. September-October 1948. Ratline network extracts Friedrich from the mountains, facilitates his transit through Italy, provides forged identity documents. November 1948. Friedrich arrives in Argentina as Carl Friedrich Adler, soon adopting the identity Klaus Hoffmann. 1940-91963. Friedrich practices medicine in Buenos Aires suburbs, marries, raises 2 daughters, lives as a respected member of the German immigrant community, never revealing his true identity. June 1963. Friedrich abandons his family and life in Argentina, returns to Europe intending to reach the Alpine Clinic, disappears in the mountains. 1963. Friedrich's ultimate fate unknown, presumably died in the Alps but remains never recovered. This meant Friedrich lived at minimum 18 years after his supposed death, possibly longer if he survived beyond 1963, though no evidence supports this. He practiced medicine for 14 of those years under a false identity. He evaded justice for his entire life. The investigation of Friedrich Wilhelm Adler's escape and hidden life raises profound questions about justice, accountability, and the moral complexities of war. By strict legal definition, Friedrich's actions likely constituted crimes against humanity. The evidence showed he participated in selection processes determining which concentration camp prisoners lived or died. He accepted payments for evaluating prisoners. He allowed patients under his care to die when treatment was available. He murdered at least 4 prisoners to prevent them from testifying about his activities. These actions violated the Nuremberg Code, the Geneva Conventions, and basic medical ethics. They would have warranted prosecution had Friedrich been captured and tried by Allied courts. Yet the case is not simple. Friedrich was not an ideological Nazi. Investigators found no evidence of political fanaticism or racial hatred. He joined the party when required for military service, but showed no enthusiasm for Nazi ideology. His crimes appear to have been motivated not by belief, but by pragmatism. The desire to survive, to protect his position, to accumulate resources for eventual escape. Does pragmatic evil differ morally from ideological evil? Philosophically, perhaps not. The victims suffered equally regardless of perpetrators' motivations. But psychologically and legally, intent matters. Friedrich seems to have been neither a true believer nor a sadist, but rather a skilled professional who made calculated choices to preserve himself at others' expense. Friedrich's case is particularly disturbing because he violated the physician's fundamental obligation to prioritize patient welfare. The Hippocratic Oath pledges, "I will do no harm." Friedrich harmed deliberately, making medical judgments based not on health but on utility. Post-war medical ethics were profoundly shaped by Nazi doctors' crimes. The Nuremberg Code, 1947, established principles of medical research ethics, specifically in response to Nazi medical experiments. The Declaration of Geneva, 1948, updated the Hippocratic Oath for the modern era, emphasizing physicians' duty to humanity above all other considerations. Friedrich's escape meant he never faced professional accountability. He practiced medicine in Argentina for 14 years, potentially treating thousands of patients. Did he uphold ethical standards in Buenos Aires while having violated them catastrophically during the war? Can a physician who committed medical crimes be rehabilitated simply by changing locations and identities? These questions have no easy answers, but they highlight why escape was not merely a legal issue, but an ethical catastrophe. It allowed a man who had betrayed medical ethics to continue practicing medicine without ever accounting for his betrayals. At the center of this case are 43 identified concentration camp prisoners transferred to Friedrich's medical station, plus countless others he may have treated or evaluated. Of these, 9 bodies have been found. The other 34 remain unaccounted for, perhaps buried in unmarked graves, perhaps deceased before reaching the station, perhaps surviving but never identified. For the families of victims, Friedrich's escape represents justice denied. Miriam Goldstein, Samuel Rosenbaum, Jakob Weiss, and 6 others identified in the clinic graves died without their killer ever facing trial. Their families mourned without closure. Friedrich lived free for decades while their memories were reduced to scattered bones in frozen ground. The descendants of these victims, contacted by investigators in 2024-2025, expressed a range of reactions. Some felt anger that Friedrich escaped justice. Some felt satisfaction that the truth finally emerged. Some felt only sadness that it came too late to matter. The perpetrator was dead. The victims long since mourned, and no prosecution could resurrect the dead or restore what was lost. Sarah Goldstein-Levy, granddaughter of Miriam Goldstein, told investigators, "My grandmother was 38 years old. She survived Auschwitz only to die in this doctor's mountain clinic. For 80 years, we did not even know where she died. Now we know, but the man who killed her escaped justice. Is this closure? I don't know. It's truth, but truth without justice is cold comfort. Friedrich was not unique. Best estimates suggest that between 9,000 and 12,000 Nazi officials, SS officers, and war criminals successfully escaped prosecution by fleeing Germany. Of these, approximately 5,000 reached South America, primarily Argentina, Brazil, Paraguay, and Chile. Approximately 2,000 reached Middle Eastern countries, primarily Syria and Egypt. Approximately 1,500 remained in Europe under false identities. The remainder scattered to various other destinations or died before capture. The vast majority were never prosecuted. They lived out their lives peacefully, many under their real names in countries that refused extradition, some under false identities that were never penetrated. Only a small fraction, perhaps 500 individuals, were eventually captured, tried, and convicted. This represents a massive failure of post-war justice. The Nuremberg trials prosecuted only the highest-ranking Nazi officials. Subsequent national trials in Germany, Austria, and Poland prosecuted several thousand more, but the majority of perpetrators escaped accountability entirely. Why did so many escape? Several reasons. The chaos of post-war Europe made tracking individuals nearly impossible. Cold War priorities shifted Allied attention from Nazi prosecution to Soviet containment. Many escape networks operated with tacit intelligence service support, and destination countries welcomed fugitives for political or economic reasons. The result was that Nazi crimes, among the most thoroughly documented atrocities in human history, went largely unpunished. This failure has implications beyond historical justice. It suggests that even massive, systematic criminality can escape accountability if perpetrators are sufficiently organized, if authorities are sufficiently distracted, and if safe havens are available. One final ethical question. Could Friedrich be considered redeemed by his post-war life? He raised a family in Argentina, practiced medicine apparently without ethical violations, lived quietly as a productive member of society. Does 18 years of normal, ethical living balance 3 years of participation in medical murder? Most moral philosophies would answer no. Criminal liability does not expire through good behavior elsewhere. A murderer who becomes a model citizen afterward remains a murderer. Justice requires accountability regardless of subsequent conduct. Yet the question highlights the complexity of human moral capacity. Friedrich was simultaneously a war criminal and a father, a medical murderer and a dedicated physician, a fugitive and a community member. Human beings contain multitudes, capacities for both great evil and mundane goodness, often coexisting without apparent contradiction. Friedrich's case does not offer redemption, but it does offer a disturbing reminder that evil is often banal, perpetrated not by monsters, but by ordinary people who make calculated choices to prioritize self-interest over principle, and who live with those choices by compartmentalizing them into sealed chambers of memory, frozen like the Alpine clinic itself, preserved but hidden from conscious acknowledgement. November 2025. The clinic site has been preserved as a historical memorial. The Austrian government, in cooperation with the International Coalition on Holocaust Remembrance, designated the location as a site of conscience, a place where history's darkest lessons remain accessible to future generations. Visitors who make the challenging trek to 2,847 meters elevation find a site that has been stabilized but not sanitized. The clinic chambers remain as they were discovered, protected by a transparent enclosure that shields the space from further environmental degradation while allowing visual access. The operating tables, the medicine shelves, the surgical instruments, all remain in place, silent testimony to medical ethics betrayed. A memorial plaque, installed in September 2025, bears the names of the 9 identified victims whose remains were discovered at the site: Miriam Goldstein, Samuel Rosenbaum, Jakob Weiss, and 6 others whose identities were confirmed through DNA analysis and archival research. Beside their names, the plaque includes this inscription in German, English, and Hebrew. Here, in the final months of World War II and the years after, concentration camp prisoners were brought to this isolated clinic for medical evaluation. Some died from disease and malnutrition. Others died from deliberate neglect or murder. Their physician, Dr. Friedrich Wilhelm Adler, escaped justice and lived under a false identity for 18 years. This memorial honors the victims who had no graves, no justice, and until now, no recognition. May their memory be a blessing, and may the truth that took 80 years to uncover serve as a warning. Evil that goes unpunished does not cease to be evil. It merely becomes easier to forget. The investigation continues, though its primary questions have been answered. Researchers still seek to identify the remaining 34 special transfer patients referenced in Friedrich's hidden documents. They still search for Friedrich's final resting place, hoping that someday a hiker might stumble upon bones that DNA analysis could link to the descendants in Buenos Aires. But the central mystery has been solved. Dr. Friedrich Wilhelm Adler did not die heroically in Berlin on April 29, 1945. He lived as a ghost for 18 years, haunting himself with memories he could never escape even by fleeing to the ends of the earth. Standing at the memorial site in November 2025, Kriminalhauptkommissar Alina Bergman reflected on 26 months of investigation that had taken her across 3 continents, through millions of documents, into the darkest chapters of human history. She thought about Friedrich, the brilliant young medical student, the skilled surgeon, the grieving father who lost his family, the pragmatic survivor who chose his own life over principle, the fugitive who lived as a lie. Was he a monster? Bergman said to a colleague who had accompanied her to the site. I've spent 2 years studying his life and I still don't know. He did monstrous things, but monsters are easy, you can hate them without complexity. Friedrich was human. That's what makes this so difficult. He was human, and humanity contains both the capacity for compassion and the capacity for calculated cruelty. He chose cruelty when it served him, then lived as if that choice had never been made. How many others have done the same? How many Friedrich Adlers walk among us now, having buried their sins so deep that even they no longer acknowledge them? The mountain offered no answer. The wind, eternal and indifferent, swept across the glacier that had kept Friedrich's secrets for 78 years. Below the memorial, the pastor's glacier continued its retreat, exposing rock that hadn't seen sunlight in millennia. Climate change, the same force that had revealed Friedrich's clinic, continues reshaping the landscape, ensuring that more secrets, geological, archaeological, historical, will eventually surface. The Earth keeps secrets, but not forever. Glaciers melt, forests burn, rivers change course, buildings crumble, and eventually always the hidden becomes visible. The forgotten becomes remembered, the buried becomes exposed. Friedrich Wilhelm Adler believed he could hide his crimes in the frozen silence of an alpine sanctuary, then bury his identity beneath layers of false names and distant lives. For 78 years he succeeded, but time and change work against all concealment. The ice that protected his secret eventually melted. The documents he hid were discovered. The DNA he left behind identified him. The truth he tried to freeze in place thawed into visibility. As visitors leave the memorial site, descending from 2,847 meters back to valleys where normal life continues, they carry with them the weight of historical knowledge that can never be unlearned. They know that justice delayed for 78 years remains justice denied. They know that evil unpunished does not cease to be evil. And they know that human beings, ordinary, educated, skilled professionals like Friedrich Adler, are capable of choices so morally catastrophic that their reverberations echo across generations. The final question is not what happened to Friedrich Wilhelm Adler. We know now. He escaped, he hid, he lived under false names, he disappeared into mountains that eventually gave up his secret. The final question is what his story means for justice, for accountability, for the human capacity to rationalize participation in atrocity. Perhaps the answer is simply this: the ice always melts, the truth always emerges, and the mountain, patient and implacable, keeps secrets only until the day it doesn't. How many other secrets remain frozen in mountains, buried in forests, hidden in archives, waiting for climate or chance or determined investigators to bring them into the light? How many other Friedrich Adlers lived full lives and died peacefully, their crimes unknown? And how many more will the future reveal? Sometimes the earth keeps secrets for 78 years, sometimes longer, but never, as this case proves, forever.